Look with your heart and soul, not your eyes. Running by Alaborn. Read to you by Asher. Chapter 3. The Running. Second year. In Ponyville, winter was wrapped up, and spring began anew. Crops were planted, apple trees tended, and the barn planted. Sweet Apple Acres was ready to prosper, and in his dreams, Big Macintosh was ready to run. The familiar training continued unabated. In the dream world, despite the lack of Pegasi, the weather remained warm well past the time of the first snowfall in Ponyville. It wasn't even cold enough for frost to form, and so there were no off-seasons for Big Macintosh the runner. When the time came to board the container to travel to a race, he found himself watching for a proper weather team. Frequent rain over the past days would make for poor running conditions, and the track he visited was thick mud. He looked over the other equines, recognizing some of their scents. They too would run. Their riders wanted to win, but Big Macintosh knew he had an advantage. He wanted to win as much as his rider. He went to the gate, ready to race. He recognized the adventurous starting position and knew he should strike out to an early lead. His rider thought the same, and as soon as the race began, he took the lead. Something felt wrong with one of his hooves. It wasn't an injury. It was some kind of feeling that warranted an examination on a normal day at Sweet Apple Acres, but would be ignored at the height of the cider season. The race was too important to worry. He pressured on. He ran until he won, and he won in a convincing fashion. The bipeds cared for him would later marvel that he ran so well with a twisted horseshoe. A second race, under much better conditions, resulted in another win for Big Macintosh. When his third trip for the year came, he anticipated much of the same. But this new venue felt different. The noises in which he thought he had gotten used to was louder. There were more equines, many he didn't recognize, and all as physical, impressive as him. And then there were the bipeds. It was not just ones who cared for him and the other queens. There were crowds of them, and they were all focused on him. He tried to hide, but there was nowhere to go. The crowds, the noise, the tension. It was all his first race all over again. He started to panic. The bipeds who cared for him noticed, and every one of them focused on calming him. It helped a little, but only got worse when he went to the track. The noise was terrible. The crowds were even larger and louder. It looked like more bipeds than all the ponies in Equestria. The air was hot and ripped with the scent of bipeds, the equines, mud, and for some reason mint. Oh, how he craved a nip of fresh spearmint. He continued to squirm until he felt a comfortable touch upon his withers. "You need to save energy for the race," he heard his rider say. The race. It was some race, much larger than he had ever ran before. 18 stalls held equines which he knew because he counted, as well as to the 18th, the last occupant stall. Despite the cotton in his ears, the noise made him nervous, and he was ready for the door to open. A prod on his flank. His year of training kicked him, and he took off. He remembered not to strain himself. He looked to his rider for guidance, and he led to a place behind the two equines who had been first out of the gate. He couldn't see. They had the physical talent to win the race, that Big Macintosh had the will. His opportunity came on the final turn. He raced along the outside, moving to overtake the other two. His body urged him to slow, but the mind said he had the strength to run faster, and so he ran faster. First one, then the second equine fell behind him. The others were still behind him when thousands of flashes of light surprised Big Macintosh. He had won the race, and thousands of cameras recorded the moment he became a champion. Despite the stress, despite the panic, he had still won. A wreath of roses was placed around his neck to crown his champion. He turned to the nabs and sculpted bud, enjoying its sweet taste. Big Macintosh's fourth race came 2 weeks later. He didn't know if the race would be like the previous ones, but he steered himself to face aggressive equines and loud bipeds, and it was good he did, as the attention he faced seemed even greater. The morning of the race, he could smell rain in the air, like when the weather ponies scheduled a heavy thunderstorm. But in this crazy world, he didn't know when or if the rain would even come. Even the thunder he heard predicted nothing. Just before he was led to the track, the rain started. Heavy rain that poured down in sheets. The earth beneath his hooves turned to mud in minutes. This time, he was inside the stall, a bad place for the runner. Big Macintosh had proved he could win on a muddy racetrack, and he would do it again. He was not eager to leave the shelter of the stall, but he was ready to run, and when the racers started, he ran. He barely sensed the presence of the other queens. The rain impaled his vision, and the mud softened the sound of the hoofballs. He felt his rider was as blind as he knew the track, knew where to turn. He ran to win, and he won convincingly. He decided to eat the yellow and black flowers placed around his neck, given the amount of mud they had picked up from his coat. Big Macintosh didn't return home. He stayed at the same track, the one where he had won in the mud, where he continued to practice. He wondered why this wasn't being done. The answer came when the older biped spoke to the two other unfamiliar ones during one training season. He was comfortable running here, he explained, and there's nothing more important than the colt's comfort. In 3 weeks, he'll be running the biggest race of his life. It's a longer race than the previous two, but we know he has the talent and the demeanor to win it all. He just needs to be physically and mentally ready. He wants to win as much as I do. The answer was direct to the bipeds, but somehow he knew the older biped was speaking to him too. The fifth race, the biggest race, was all that was on Big Macintosh's mind in both the waking and the dream world. He imagined it as a trip to the Equestria Games. The accumulation of the years of training and holding his special talent. He knew all about the games, thinking to a certain Pegasus who was always coming over for cider. But the feeling of being a champion was one that words could not describe. But first he had to win the race. That day finally arrived, a beautiful day for running, and Big Macintosh was ready to run. He focused on his body, and remembering the words of the older biped, focused on his mind. He needed to be comfortable. Putting the stress and panic out of his mind, he leaned back against the stall and almost about missed the gate opening. He took off, earth crunching under his hooves as he ran. He would not be satisfied with a mere win. He wanted a dominant win. He pushed to the head of the pack and was determined to stay there until the end. Another queen pushed past him, almost surpassing him. Big Macintosh was not worried. He recognized the signs of an equine running too fast. burning out his energy before the race was over. When he hit the wall, he faded fast. Big Macintosh ran. He would win because he had the talent, the training, and the will. If this was his greatest race, he wouldn't give his greatest effort. He respected the other Koreans running down behind him, but that was where they would have to be. Behind him, Noah Queen seriously challenged Big Macintosh as he rounded the bend. With a final burst of speed, he crossed the finish line. From here, the dream shifted. He was looking at himself, his strange equine self, and the small biped riding him. He saw flashes of the older biped and all the ones who cared for him and tended him. He saw their reactions, their sheer joy, and what he had accomplished. And there he heard a disembodied voice speak. And here it is. The 37 years await is over. American Ferrell is finally the one. America Ferrell has won the Triple Crown. Big Macintosh saw one last thing. A symbolized image of a pony running. A cutie mark. And with a smile, he awoke from Discord's dream. He awoke from Discord's dream world one last time.